Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me well. If so, please let me know via the chat if you can hear me. Just a quick hi or hello is enough. I will also be using the chat okay, that's great. I will also be using the chat to ask you some questions. So I hope that you're a bit in an active mood today, despite the very warm weather, at least here. I don't know what it is like where you are joining from, of course. Okay, let's get straight to our topic of today. I will be talking about the return on investment of user experience and even broader of human-centered design. Now, I've seen from the participant lists that there is a lot of people that have experience in user experience that are doing human-centered design. So I will expect that you will recognize some things, especially in the beginning when I will introduce the topic, which I think is important for those who do not have that same experience. But I'll dive quickly into the topic of ROI before listening to you as well a little bit and hearing how you feel about return on investment of user experience, whether you have already any questions regarding the topic or not. Good. A little bit maybe about me. Some of you know me. I've worked with some of you, others I haven't yet. So my name is David Geerts. I am a partner and also co-founder at U.Sentric, and I am also currently research manager of the KU Leuven Digital Society Institute, a new interdisciplinary institute at the University of Leuven here in Belgium. Also, a little bit about U.Sentric for those who don't know us yet. There's a lot of text here on the slide that you can read afterwards when we're going to share that with you. But let me say that as I'm from the university, it's quite clear that, and I was co-founder, it was started at the university, then the Center for User Experience Research, but now the Digital Society Institute, since 2007, so more than 14 years of experience already in various industries. What we do is not market research, but it's user research, and that will become clear later on in the presentation as well. And of course, focusing on the human aspect. Everywhere, everything that we do, it's really placing the human at the center, of course. We have expertise in innovation, redesign, transformation, and also various methods from going to gathering insights to creating new ideas to implementing new designs. An important aspect of our work is, as I said, making the end user or making your end user, if you're the end client, an integral part of your future. This means that, as I already said, it's really involving the end user in all phases of the design and also with various goals, let's say. It's involving them in the creation of relevant, joyful, useful digital applications. That's the user experience. We'll delve into that in a minute. Involving them in the creation of new services and products. This is the innovation, but it also goes further than that. It also goes into creating processes that are efficient and sustainable and really creating user-centered digital transformation for companies. And then another step forward is going to look at how we can implement UX offices to really transform a company to become a customer-centered organization. And finally, training teams, of course, to also discover this value and power of being user-centered through the various methods and approaches. Now, this series of webinars, this is the first in 3, also moves a little bit across this space of going from UX and the return on investment of human-centered design towards how can we make companies more user-centered to making them more really a customer-centered organization. But the first step, of course, is, what is human-centered design and why should we do that? Or if you are already convinced of human-centered design, how can we convince other people and can we show and create the numbers that are necessary to make sure that our companies become more human-centered? Now, first, I want to start with, because human-centered, user experience, usability, at some points there are buzzwords. that not all companies are actually doing what they claim to be doing. And this is a very interesting quote that I like to use there as well. It's that what people say, what people do, what they say they do are entirely different things. From an anthropologist, that a quote that's been used for a long time now, but I think is still very important and valid, because often doing human-centered design for some companies or organizations is setting out a questionnaire or maybe doing an interview, but really only listening to what people are saying. And what you get then, if you listen to what people say, that's okay. You can get interesting information out of that, but you get very explicit information, things that are top of mind, things that people have at hand, the knowledge that they share, but not really what they do. It's very hard for people to articulate what they actually are doing, because people are forgetful, they don't put things in the right order, and there's a lot of important information in what people do. So in order to get to what people do, you need to observe them. And then you get the observable information that you don't get by what people are saying, because they're missing out on that. And there's even a third step there as well, which is if you can let people make, and then we come into methods such as co-creation workshops, for example, then you can delve in even more deeper into more tacit information, which is information that is very hard to articulate, information that are more linked to values, dreams, and where you can get even further than the standard usability and go more into that, what is called user experience, which we'll go into in a second. This act of observation is so important that I want to show you some examples of that. Look at this setting where you can see a lot of paperwork. It's an office work. I think all of us can associate ourselves with that because most of us are doing office work as well. But you can already see the region of information in this image, color codes in the different papers, piles of papers, books, notes that are hung somewhere. All that can help you guide the design of an application, things that are very hard to capture if you are only doing interviews. But if you go into other areas where you can, where are well, less familiar with, for example, here a truck driver or people working to clean the airplanes, or in a high facility lab, for example. These are things that we are even further away from, so it's much harder to identify with those circumstances. So you really need to know what is going on in there, and that's why we need a human-centered design process. Human-centered design process goes from understanding first this context of use. What do people do? Who are those people? What are their tasks? What is the environment in which they work? And only if you understand that, then you can go specify user requirements, produce design solutions that meet those user requirements. These design solutions are then prototypes, mock-ups, or further designs that you can then evaluate and see if they meet the requirements. Important also in this whole process is iteration, which means going back to understanding better the context of use if you maybe are going into separate areas of your design, updating the user requirements, and especially the iteration of producing even more and more designs, evaluating them until you get it entirely right. So for a lot of you already active in human-centered design, this is not a new approach, of course. But I want to also link back, because this will be important for the return on investment of human-centered design and user experience. Go like, what is the result that we are aiming at? Well, we want to have usable designs, of course, but we also want to have a great user experience. So on the left, you see the common definition of what is a usable design. It's based on the context of use. It's knowing who your users are, what their tasks and goals are, and in which environment they work, and using that as inputs to create a design that is then effective, efficient, and where people are satisfied. Now, this is important because these are measures. These are things that we can measure, and then we go to measure the return on investment. This is a starting point, of course. Now, on the right side, you see one of the maybe most used, but there's others, of course, models of user experience, where we see usable is not enough. It also has to be useful, valuable, credible, accessible, desirable, and findable. And these are all things that are measurable as well, where you can see how accessible something is, but even how desirable something is. So there is all approaches to measure that. Of course, that's all good to know, but then you still need to convince people that usability, user experience is important. And that brings us to the topic of today, which is on the return on investment of user experience and human-centered design. Now, let's have first a question. Let's see if everyone is still awake. How many of you have already struggled with trying to prove the return on investment? Who has already had, or let me put it first, maybe broader, who has already had to prove that? Who had already had questions? And what was the question? What was the type of answer that was satisfying, or maybe you were not even able to satisfy them? Just please throw something in the chat. I can have a sip in the meantime. Anyone? Okay, I'll continue. Please, maybe you have to get your thoughts together still. Please put some things in the chat of things that are important to you regarding return on investment, or things that you have already come across, or any questions that you might have, so that we can try to make this a bit interactive today. Good. I'll continue with looking at return on investment of user experience and human-centered design. And I first want to show this classic, let's say, grid of the different types of return on investment. But I'm going to go beyond that in a minute, as you will see. But this is the one that is usually seen as the most important items in how you can improve the return on investment. First one is in the longest list, at least here, is in use. You can improve effectiveness of the way that people use your applications. You can increase the success rate of the tasks that people have to complete, less user errors, the productivity will go higher, user satisfaction. If it's in a work context, then the job satisfaction might also increase, ease of learning, increase trust. And also, of course, in this row is also the support costs and the training costs that you can reduce. So this is already a cost reduction as well that you can have here. A second column is in the audience reach, and especially this is, of course, when you have more transaction websites or application where you want to increase traffic, you want to keep customers and attract more customers, the market share, transactions and product use that is going up, or more downloads in the App Store, for example. And then a third column is on the development side. You can reduce costs, and this is a bit counterintuitive because you have to do all that work of observing people and getting the requirements. So wouldn't it create more time? And this is also the hardest one to convince management of, because they see the extra costs coming. But of course, it will also make sure that you have faster the right design, that you know better what you need to develop. And so you will actually save development time. And there's a lot of numbers and figures that can be shown of people that have been able to save those costs. Let me show some of those figures and numbers. I can see there's a couple of questions coming up that might be something to address later on. How do you show that an ROI has the outcome of a design process can be ambiguous? I'm not sure if it's also a bit ambiguous to me, Arno, this question, but maybe I assume that you want to say whether you can distinguish the ROI of UX and human-centered design versus marketing or other activities, right? I'll come back to that later. And then it's hard to show ROI, especially if it's a one-off project and a small contract. How can we still show something, even if we do not have long-term access to the projects? Okay, excellent questions. I'll come back to those in a second, and I'll go through some examples here of where return on investment have been shown to be proved. This is from Expedia. This is an A/B test. I'll come back to that in a couple of minutes as well, where they had first a form field where people had to fill in their cards information. And the cardholder name, first name, last name, and there was also a field called company name, which was not compulsory, and then the primary billing address. Now, a lot of people thought that they had to fill in their bank name there. They were a bit confused because it's the card, so they filled in the company name, they filled in the bank name there, they filled the billing address of the bank, and then they got error messages or problems with that later on, and they just abandoned it. So just by removing that company name, which was actually for them not so crucial, they increased the amount of bookings with $12 million just by one form field that was changed and by interacting with users and seeing how they interacted with the site. Another example from a software company, VM, that made a simple change in a formulation, request a quote, it's called here, and there they changed it into request pricing. And just by that small change that has like a different feeling for people, a quote versus getting really the pricing of that, they got 161% more click-through rate. So more people clicked on that link and of course then also got to buy the product. This is a recent one that I find. I don't have any numbers for that of click-through rates or whatever, but just to show you that it's sometimes very small details that can make a big difference, where you can sign up for coronavirus updates on the Seattle Times. You can do that for various topics, but for this topic, then you have the button that you need to click says, yes, I want coronavirus. So I can, of course, see that people would hesitate to click on a button like that. But it's not just these small details. It's not only small details that make a difference. It's also the bigger, let's say, image of your website. This is the healthcare.gov website from a number of years ago when Obama was still in office, where people in the US could sign up. And that healthcare.gov portal would be like the best way for people to sign up, and that would be easy. And they were actually way down below their goals of reaching the amount of people that they want. They wanted to reach 500,000 people with this. Only 100,000 people signed up in general, and only a quarter of that, so 25,000 signed up through this portal. So there was really something wrong. And the interesting thing is that also Obama realized that. And I just want to give you a short quote of what President Obama said at the time.
Example of this, by the way, just to use an analogy. When we came into office, we heard a lot of complaints about the financial aid forms that families have to fill out to get federal financial aid. And I actually remember applying for some of that stuff and remember how difficult and confusing it was. And Arnie Duncan over at Education worked with a team to see what we could do to simplify it, and it made a big difference. And that's part of the process that we've got to go through. And in fact, if we can get some focus groups and we sit down with actual users and see, how well is this working? What would improve it? What part of it didn't you understand? That all, I think, is part of what we're going to be working on in the weeks ahead.
Good. So interesting thing, a couple of things in this clip is nice. One of the things is that they really noticed, they identified, and he said he experienced it himself, even that it was confusing, it was not clear, and it had to be simplified. But also then that they would go through a process of involving users. Now, they use the word focus groups, which I'm a bit allergic to, I must say, in the context of human-centered design. It's more than the focus groups. You really have to do the user testing and observations and maybe some co-design sessions if needed. But of course, the goal is there that he says you need to sit down with users, you need to see what they're doing, you need to learn from that, and then you can improve the website in that. The government of the UK has also been for a long time already doing that very successfully, and even winning the Design of the Year award. And that's also what you see with companies that really have the human-centered design process, or are design-centric, as they say. There's various studies that have shown that they outperform the traditional companies that do not do that have design and human-centered design at the basis of their innovation processes. So now we come to the core topic of today, which is, okay, we now see what the return on investment can be. There's a lot of numbers that are going around, and if you Google and search, you will find a lot more of those. But what I want to look at now is how can we measure that? So how can we make sure that we can show, and as you saw, indeed, there's already a couple of questions of, okay, it's maybe hard. How do you show that as an outcome of the design process and not of other processes? How if you have a small project? Now, the first things that we saw is like a simple A/B test are already quick things that you can do, that you can already show the difference between two designs, showing one design versus the other design, and seeing how many people click through, how many people go to the checkout, how many people buy something. There you can really kind of quickly get a good idea of, okay, this one feature, this one part has a clear effect. It doesn't necessarily even have to be an A/B test. You can also do this kind of tests if you don't have the resources or knowledge to do this A/B testing by a simple user test, where you have two different variants with even a relatively small amount of people. You can already show how two versions work differently. Of course, the more quantitative results you have in this sense, this is a more convincing to show the return on investment. But you need a benchmark, and I'll come back to that in a minute as well. A second thing I want to show here is the a couple of calculators, they're called, and you see the link in the right lower corner, which you can really do the more complicated calculations of what the return on investment would be if, for example, you can shave off 10 seconds of efficiency in logging in, for example, to a system where people have to log in multiple days. So this is one example. They have on the right side, you can see that they also have help desk conversion rates, training, drop-off rate, and learning curve as calculators. So when they have similar things there, where you can fill in, okay, how many people are working in a company, how many seconds do they take, or what is the improved seconds that they need to log in, for example. How many hours do they work per day, annual salary, and so on. And what you get out of this calculator is then a result, okay, this 10 seconds will give you that much improvement in gain. And I think that, I know, is maybe already an answer to your question, where you can actually kind of isolate one element of a design, that login process that gives you 10 seconds of improvement, and where you can show in a simulation, of course, because this is not in the real life environment, but where you can at least isolate that part of the design and say, well, this is what you can gain from the improvement. And you can even put the improvement cost in here. How much will it cost to do that improvement? And say, well, this is what you get. And also, how long will this project run? How before there's another change in there? You can even calculate a total return on investment for that. So this is a really good tool if you want to kind of simulate and want to, in advance, be able to show to people where you are going to create an improved return on investment. Now, I want to end, and then there's still some room for questions, I assume. I want to end with going into a bit more systematic improvement. And I think that, Katrien, maybe this also answers your question, although This is more something that will work on a longer project. But I think also for smaller one-off projects, you would be able to do this. It's really creating in advance, of course, before you start an ROI measurement plan, where you can then define, okay, what is it exactly that we want to improve on? It comes from a nice blog post that I also share the link under here. So for people that want to know more, you can find a lot of details in there as well. But it's actually starting with, let's say, what you traditionally have to do anyway in human-centered design. It's defining your audience. What is the representative audience that you are going to define the return on investment for, that you're going to design for, and what are their top tasks? This is maybe the specific terminology of Jerry McGovern, but you can, of course, also do it in general. What are the most important tasks and goals that you identified for your users? Because that's, of course, where you're going to define your metrics on. And what are then the metrics that you want to focus on? And this is where it's important to link that. And there you see that in step 6 already. You have to make sure that they link with your company KPIs. What is important for your company? What are their goals? And we'll go back into that next week also, when we go to see how customer-centered your company is. But of course, there you need to see whether you can link the metrics. And we've talked about efficiency. Can people, how many errors do people make? How fast do they achieve their tasks? Effectiveness, can they complete their tasks? And the satisfaction. These are the traditional usability metrics that you can use. But as I said, there's also this user experience metrics, where you look more at desirability, where you have the attractive questionnaire, for example, that can measure the hedonic aspects of an experience as well. And this is important to measure and link with your company KPIs. And then, of course, the most important steps are making sure that you benchmark the current experience. What do you start from? And then you can do afterwards compare your redesign to this benchmark. So in principle, it's not that difficult to define a return on investment once you know which metrics are important for your company, and making sure that you create a system, a setup, and a plan where you kind of define that in advance. And all these calculators and A/B testing and so on, they can help, of course, in making it more quantitative and showing actually to the people of management how important that is. This is an example from that same website, from that same blog post, that shows how efficiency, effectiveness, perceived difficulty, which links more to the satisfaction. You can even have specific scores that maybe you're familiar with, an NPS score, the system usability scale, a specific measurements, and then see what you expect to be improved, and then link that with your company KPIs. Finally, I want to end with, which is maybe a bit out of scope for return on investment, but on the other hand, it's maybe not as measurable, but there's a lot of other benefits of user experience, of human-centered design, that is not very quantifiable, but is very important to also show management, to also show to people that you can improve on that. It's creating better innovations. It's having better ideas that are matched with your your user needs. It's help making decisions, help making a choice whether you go for this or that. And of course, that will speed up the development process as well. It will also improve your brand awareness and company image. It will show that you are concerned about your users, and people will see that and know that the products are better adapted to their needs. And maybe also in a broader sense, it will also improve your users' quality of life, make your users happy, let's say. And of course, if you have happy users, you also have a happy company, and people are proud to work for that company and create products for happy users. So that's also something I think that we shouldn't forget when we're trying to quantify this return on investment, that it goes further than just this efficiency and effectiveness and satisfaction measures. And then a final quote that is always nice to give to your measurement as well, from the CEO of Jaguar, that said that if you think good design is expensive, you should look at how what the cost is of bad design. So with that, I would like to thank you for attending this seminar, for listening to me. I would like to ask you also if you have any questions still. Now is the moment. Please put them in the chat so I can respond to that. And no question, then I thank you all again, and I wish you a nice rest of the afternoon. Bye.